scared to introduce me because of the way the introductions have been going. Richard, I was going to let you do it now. I've got it highlighted for you. If you, okay, okay. Well, we have Mark Snead with us here today. Thank God he stayed. I thought the first 10 minutes was a lot of fun and probably more fun than a weekend with an economist, but then the last 3 or 4 minutes reminded me of probably an accounting/economist weekend function. So anyway, yeah, no, go figure. Anyway, Mark, sorry. He's the president of RegionTrack. Now, I'm going to have to read this because of the pressure. His research has been widely cited by public officials, other researchers, and leading media outlets. Prior to founding RegionTrack, Mark served as vice president of the Denver branch executive of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Prior to that, he was at Oklahoma State University. He was director of OSU Center of Applied Economic Research and research economist on the Oklahoma State econometric model. He's a native of Atlanta, undergrad UGA, master's at Georgia Tech, and then a doctorate at Oklahoma State. Now, I think this is at least your fourth time to grace us, so thank you, and so. I'm sure there won't be a fifth, but anyway, thank you, Mark. Come on up.
All right. All right, I'm wrestling with this microphone. It's good to be here. Am I shouting at you? Is this too loud? Okay. I feel like I can hear it in my ears. Well, good to be here. It's I just got asked, am I going to answer questions about minimum wage? And I was thinking I didn't really plan to, but maybe I'll stop. I don't know exactly what the title is today. We've been spending a lot of time looking at AI, the role of data centers, electricity prices. We've been spending a lot of time with those topics the past year or so, and I learned a lot. I thought I knew, what the bigger, broader effects were of these, and I learned a few of these areas I didn't exactly have the details down. So yeah, we can talk about that. I got a minimum wage question. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I mean, the biggest topic with the state outlook, state forecast, we got revised job numbers at the end of April, and we knew job data was weaker than reported. We knew they were grossly they were inflating the data. But it looks like we had maybe a slight job recession in 25, from January through December. But it looks like first 4 months of the year, again, if you can believe the data, we're seeing some upward momentum again. But 25 we were just kind of hanging on. Tax revenue, was sort of skidding to a halt a bit. Oil and gas industry is still in rough condition. In fact, the past 6 months have really been tough on the oil and gas sector. So you want to do minimum wage and get it out of the way?
I don't know that we can get it out of the way. Why don't I ask questions at the end?
Tell me what you think about minimum wage first. You must declare your stance, I think.
I must declare?
Yes, you must declare.
I've heard a lot of compelling arguments, honestly, from both sides. And I want to know, have you seen states that have raised their minimum wage? Like, for instance, my son goes to college in Missouri. And their minimum wage is much higher than ours. And when I go there, I keep hearing, well, if we raise the minimum wage, cost of everything is going to go up. Everything's more expensive. Everything's this. Everything's that. It's just gonna ruin what we've got going in Oklahoma. But like I see Missouri, and it seems to be doing good. And so, do you have examples of states that have raised their minimum wage? And if so, how did that impact them? Do you have any examples?
Okay. There is more research than you can digest in your lifetime about the effects of minimum wage. The problem with a lot of it is that it all asks a wide range of questions. And so when you drill down into minimum wage, the question is it a good thing or a bad thing depends upon who you are trying to help. Because minimum wage changes almost never help who they're designed to help, and they have very predictable negative outcomes on others that were not intended to be part of this, that they're help but aren't help. So It's a really complicated set of outcomes. There is a guy, I want to say he's at the University of Utah. He did another after the state of Washington, you know, they really are far more aggressive than we've ever dreamed of being about minimum wage. But he took literally every existing, you know, reputable journal with research on minimum wage and tried to classify what is the weight of the evidence suggest about minimum wage. So when you ask this question, we have this, you know, this sort of research-backed and substantiated answer to it. And it kind of goes like this. First, almost nobody works for minimum wage. The percentage of the labor force that is actually subject to.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on that line, so when
Yeah.
I'm seeing stats from
Yes.
different sources that are
Yes.
saying this impacts 390,000 people,
Where?
like what are they? What stat are they referring to?
390,000.
In Oklahoma.
Oh, no way. No. I mean, we have like 1.6 million jobs in the
Yeah.
state. And in Oklahoma, it would be more like divide that by 10
Okay.
and maybe some fraction of that.
Okay.
In fact, we don't really know how many people earn minimum wage at the state level. We have decent data at the national level. Anything at the state level is just a guess based on the American Community Survey.
So we're saying
some of
that
the
not many
others.
people work for that, but we really don't know.
There's no way. Literally, it's impossible that it would be 25% of. You're suggesting 20 to 25% of the. Literally
in front of me.
impossible. The numbers are closer. They're like a small single digits in most states. Higher income states, it would be closer to 1.5 or 2%. Lower income states, closer to 3 or 4%. But no, like divide that number by 10, and you're going to get pretty close to it. But so very few work for it, and second, it's really highly concentrated in only a few industries. It's almost exclusively retail, food service, and hospitality. That literally is the 85% of the entire base of it. And the other issue is that of those, a large share of those don't truly earn minimum wage because they are tip compensated. So you've got this whole division in the literature of trying to understand exactly which of the generally believed to be working for minimum wage actually do work for minimum wage. And the data suggests that it's probably some fraction that is close to having, cut that in half, and you'll have a truer fraction of the share that actually receive minimum wage, not have a base wage of the minimum wage. And so that's one difficulty. It's really narrow, and you are affecting only a few industries. It's also highly age dependent, and again, it's like I think the magic number that he came up with was his best guess was like 40 to 45% are under the age of 19, literally high school age or pre-college. And then there's another group that's in the college range, like 19 to 25. And then there's almost none, like the 10 to 12% range, that are actually above 25 that receive the minimum wage. And then the question extends to how many of those actually are trying to raise children or support a family. And that share is literally invisible. It's closer to 5%. And then the question involved with that particular group is, what explains that? Why are they, if you're, say, 25 and over and you have children, why are you working for minimum wage? And the answer is by educational breakdown. Literally, these are high school or not even high school completers. So it's an education story, not a minimum wage story. And there's several other ways to dissect the data. And then the question is, once you implement it, what does the data say about the shifts in the labor force? And you hear the cost structure shift. And the data is sort of overwhelmingly true that, yes, in those industries where you do have immediate shifts upward in wages, it does translate into a slight upward increase in cost, in the cost structure. And yes, it does tend to reduce the sign. The question is, what's the sign here? Is it zero, positive, or negative? And the sign tends to be negative across a huge range of studies. But that's just... It's restricted to a few groups, and there are suggestions that the elasticities, the sensitivities are just pretty small all around. But they're negative. So the net effect of minimum wage increases on the body of people affected by the, directly affected by it, it is a net negative wage increase, and it raises prices, and it does tend to push, cost push through the system. So yes, everything that is predicted does happen. There's just no doubt about it. And the question is, what does a typical minimum wage recipient's lifetime earnings look like? And the answer is almost nobody stays at minimum wage very long. So what you are really doing is you're really affecting entrance into the labor force, immediate entrance. And it's very little effect to those who are already in the labor force, who are above 25, and this, this idea of can you raise a family on minimum wage. What you're really doing is negatively affecting new entrants, the youngest in the labor force, like really 16 to 19, the high school kid population. You are negatively affecting them, and you are negatively affecting any retailer or hospitality provider or anyone else.
Like they're not going to get hired because we pay more, or they're just not going to hire as many, or? Well,
just sort of the general rule that the more expensive anything is, the less quantity of it that as a whole the market will buy. And you've got state distributional effects too. Each state is going to be, in effect, determined individually by the price level, the significance of the minimum wage, how far you're pushing it into the existing wage structure, and it goes way beyond that. My point, I will just summarize it as there is no such thing as a simple answer to pushing minimum wages upward.
And we can't compare our state to another state, apples to apples, because there's too many different fruits
literally
in the
impossible.
bag.
It depends on what the wage rate is relative to your prevailing wage at the low end of the scale. It's really more of an education question. It is not really a
So,
sort of
for
public
instance, if
policy
a
issue.
state put a lot of investment in education, we'd be much better off.
Well, I think I am persuaded to believe. Yeah. Yeah, I think I am persuaded. Yes.
All right, move on to AI. But thank you for your thoughts.
Well, Mark, can I ask
Yeah.
a follow-up question before you move on to AI?
Jump in, yeah.
So the particular state question we're going to be voting on
Yes.
is open-ended. It works to 15 years over, or $15 over 3 or 4 years,
Yes.
but then it's tied to the consumer price index,
Yes.
and it keeps going up.
Right.
Is that problematic in terms of our economy and so forth?
Here you're going to have to, you asked me if that is problematic to me, and I think anytime you tie government expenditures of any type or private sector, which essentially, these are forced government, anytime you do that, you are sort of making a permanent inflationary buildup in that particular component, whether it's wages or insurance or any other component of employee costs. And I almost in every case would consider that to be a bad idea, just like indexing government spending in general to either population. We have this belief that that if population increases 10%, government spending should increase 10%. The reality is government should be becoming more efficient. We see that across regions as they grow, government actually becomes more efficient. And what you're doing is just, you're hardwiring, these artificial barriers that we know not to be helpful into the system. And no, I mean, personally, I would never view that as a good idea, ever. And I can't think of any circumstances, but yeah, my real answer to your question is, I don't think it matters one bit. All you're going to do is slightly help it's going to be a temporary boost to one group and a temporary cost to other groups. And I honestly don't see the net benefit of ever tinkering with private sector wage rates. If the government, even at the federal, state, or local level, wants to tinker with wage rates, they should do it with local, state, and federal government wages. And we're trying that. And I think what we found is at the top end of the scale, federal wages are in many cases, way above private sector pay scales at this point, and they're wrestling with that. Public safety's wrestling with that across the board about, at the state and local level. We're all wrestling with what it costs to provide, police, fire, any other professional service like that. The wages are in many cases indexed exactly as you're describing, and it's a real issue. So no, I generally am not a fan of in any way intervening in private sector wages. Yeah. So I don't have a popular opinion. I really don't like to talk about it because I'm not soft and cuddly enough on that topic.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I now want an economy degree.
Yeah.
Let's talk after.
All right. They sell them at OSU. They will. Yes, they do. All right. So is there any other topic that we could distract away from AI? Because I know if there are any fistfights today, it's not my fault. Because I know these get contentious. I've got, I said earlier, this is there's some good, some bad, and some ugly about AI, about data centers, about electricity. Really, though, I sort of wrap all this around state economic development strategy. And I have some serious concerns about some of the things we do as it involves state economic development strategy. At the local level, I think you let cities cut loose and you let them do basically whatever they want to do. You've got local eyeballs on every decision, and it's intense at that level, but that's not really the way the path of economic development in Oklahoma has developed over the past 20 years. It's become increasingly centralized at the state level, Commerce Department. And my real ugly part is that most of it is going on behind closed doors. And I literally, I hate to even say this word, corruption. This is how problems start when you have big bags of money that change hand behind closed doors. And I'm going to start off, I wrote a list of these things that I think are really important tied to this whole issue, and one of them is this whole NDA problem. If you don't know, an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. And I have been told I am just completely missing the boat, missing the point on this, that if we don't sign non-disclosure agreements, nobody will come to Oklahoma to try to build anything. And first, I have to be really clear about what happens in these transactions. You would think that these firms would show up and slide a piece of paper across the table and say, if you sign this, we will talk about this project with you. But that's not really what happens at all. The state of Oklahoma pushes a piece of paper across the table and says, if you sign this, we don't have to discuss your data. That's what really happens. And I find that beyond problematic. Again, this is a real, the adage of shine light, and the cockroaches flee. This literally is something that really is beginning to worry me, because I'm told again, they won't show up, they won't talk to us, we'll never have any sort of large economic development project occur in Oklahoma. Let's assume that's true. And let's assume we do use NDAs, we do sign them, we abide by them. What is the problem with the NDA ending the moment the deal is consummated or the moment that the project is completed? What is the role of in perpetuity? We have secrecy about these transactions. Why do we need that? Because it's one thing, it's bad enough in my world that you can't evaluate them up front, you can't do thorough analysis, you can't determine what the list of benefits would be and what the list of costs would be, and let all of us wrestle them and see if somehow the benefits outweigh the costs. Well, it's bad enough you can't do that up front, but what is the problem with going back after the fact and evaluating them? Why can't we do that? So I'm just going to get that one out of the way, because it's really permeated all of state government and the way we do economic development. And that's the way it works. There's been this attitude in Oklahoma. I'm a transplant, okay? I arrived in the early 90s. The state had such a confidence problem. If I heard it once, I heard it a million times. We're a poor state. There are no poor states in America. I mean, there's no such critter. And the notion, well, first it was, oil and gas spilled over for at least 15 years. It was a rough period for the state. There's no doubt about it. 1982 to really 97-ish, 98, really tough times in the state. And the confidence level of the state was just shot. But it has lingered, into recent years, and this notion that nobody will come to Oklahoma and do business because there's something wrong with Oklahoma. This is just like a great place to live. I don't know why it takes outsiders to show up in Oklahoma and go, man, this is like a jewel in the making. This is really a great place. There's so many things about it to love. Great weather. People shudder when I go, wow, the weather's great here. I lived in the southeast. The humid climate is just the worst place. I will never live in the southeastern U.S. again, ever. It's just unbearable. The weather is just fabulous, and it's just a great place to live. But this has permeated into a lot of government, the idea that we can't get anyone to come here to do business unless we pay them a big check. And we've got to get past that. And not only do we have to pay them a big check, we've got to do it in secrecy and in the dark. And so I'm going through those first because we're about to move to the other questions of we've got a real issue on our hands. We've got this AI thing. So how many of you think AI is for real? There's some there. AI is just like the cool. Okay, I love this list of stuff. I don't remember the building of the railroads. I was born a few years after that, but the railroads, the interstate systems, electricity, the expansion of oil and gas. Do you remember in the 90s the expansion of fiber optic? When they were ripping up every area in the U.S., laying fiber optic cable everywhere they possibly could, taking oil and gas lines, running fiber cable, everywhere. Some of you may remember the World War II buildup, the expansion of soldiers coming back, residential expansion, universities, the university campuses exploded. We've had all sorts of major inventions in this world. The internet, this is just incredible. I will give you my opinion about this, and my opinion has not changed in the slightest. AI is by far the single most amazing invention that if there's anything more amazing than this in my lifetime, I really want to see it. Because it is just absolutely astounding what it is capable of doing. In fact, it is as close to magic as you will ever get in this life. It is absolutely astounding. If you don't use it, well, first of all, none of you don't use AI. Every single one of you are using it, whether you think you are or not. And it is absolutely transformational. I'll tell you what's interesting about it, though, is that it is built on top of all of these prior inventions. Electrification, computerization, the internet, digital transmission of information, electricity from a variety of sources, wind, solar. It's built on the fiber development. I mentioned these because AI is literally taking all of the greatest inventions of really the past 100 years and layering on top of them something that is just astounding. It's changed my business fundamentally in every single way. I can't even describe for you. The most interesting impact for us is that we are all really good programmers. You don't work with me or our group unless you're a really solid programmer. Well, we have gone from being good programmers to we are world class, able to do things we never envisioned we were capable of doing a year and a half ago at this point. Let's jump in, go right ahead. And somebody tell me when I need to stop, because I don't know when your schedule is. Okay.
Oklahoma being, obviously we've gone through that stage of, it's an oil state, a cattle state. We're a rural state,
Yes.
basically. But nowadays, it seems like, is there going to be a real economic downfall if we don't accept the data centers, the wind turbines, and the high electricity transmission lines that everywhere, every time one comes through, you hear the residents in an uproar and try to stop it. So if that's not acceptable or accepted, is there going to be an economic downfall for Oklahoma?
I think there are two elements to data centers. There are You can buy data centers, and that's what we're doing. We're buying them. Or you can buy firms that use data centers going forward. We are spending our economic development capital on buying data centers. And I would argue that those are the easier to obtain and build, and to keep. Because when they lay brick and mortar, they're there. They aren't going to move. They're tied to the electric, water, and digital infrastructure. They will not move. But the firms that are tied to, to data centers literally can be anywhere, and that's a problem in terms of actually locating them, in Oklahoma. But I think those are the firms that you're talking about. And it may not be individually that there is a way to identify firms directly tied to it, but every firm, has some component of it that will be tied to it. And so I think what we haven't really turned our vision to, like in looking forward, is how do we assist existing firms that want to become more data center or just generally AI dependent, or firms that want to relocate that are more dependent. And I think it may even be as much related to the existing industries you already have an advantage in. Like it's AI in oil and gas, AI in aviation, AI even if it's ag, AI in ag. I think maybe there's some transfer from the old to the new, because these industries aren't going away. Oil and gas is not going away.
But just the physical appearance
Yeah.
of the wind turbines and the
Yeah.
transmission lines that's coming across is not only changing
Yeah.
the look of
The view.
Oklahoma,
Yeah.
but the people that have to
Yeah.
deal with it. I don't know
Well,
whether that's
the one concern I have about it is that there's a lot of discussion that we become an exporter of electricity, meaning we have an above average number of wind turbines or solar panels or just general natural gas fired electric plants, and we export it. And the problem there is that we have no mechanism in place to tax those exports so that you can compensate the state for those things. Oil and gas has its own problems. The environmental dimension. If you took the environmental dimension away from oil and gas, it would be almost a perfect industry. But that environmental dimension is still there, and it will not go away. But that's what worries me a bit, is that there's no governmental structure in place to build out that sector further, because we'll have to export it to other states. And I think they would gladly pay for it because they're getting it essentially at the same price or less than they would have to produce it themselves. I mean, that's why California likes to import electricity. Anywhere they buy it, it's going to come at a price lower than it would cost to generate it in state. And so we have no ability to equalize those prices. And there are a number of dimensions that you mentioned that I think about and worry about a little bit. But just, is this going to hit Oklahoma negatively compared to, say, other states? No, I don't think so. And I think others would argue that one way to make sure that happens is that we get in on the data center side, not the business use side. But we go ahead early and get in on the data center side. And that's fine too, as long as you don't overpay for them. And that, I think, is the danger we face at this point, is that we're heaving large sums of money at them, and we're using resources that have market value. And I don't know why we and I think it traces back to that view that we still think people just don't want to come to Oklahoma and do business with us. And that, I think that'll age out of the system over time, but it's still deep. It's deeply entrenched. Even in the legislature, that view is deeply entrenched.
Do we have more questions? Got time for a couple.
Yeah.
Sarah's coming.
These are always complicated issues, but
Okay, so 20 years ago, I heard you give a speech and you talked about efficiencies of scale and people moving from rural communities to cities. During that time, you have cities like Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, that have grown exponentially. Is there a point in time where the efficiency of living in a city changes because of quality of life and people move back to rural areas?
you know the answer to that question. Yeah. Yeah, I think we all do. You know, I lived in New York for 4 months, way back in the. Well, actually, I lived in New Jersey, across the river, had a beautiful view. You know, and I learned about large cities at that point, and the research literature, you know, tries to define it a little more closely. Is there a point at which, you know, cities that are growing grow faster, and then eventually the growth rate peels off, and then is there some cost to doing business? And the answer is that yes, it is. It's these small to mid-sized metropolitan areas that experience the fastest growth. You know, with you can measure success or positive outcomes in a number of ways, but usually it's income growth and population growth. And yes, they do. Once you get to the, I would say at this point, there's a guy at the Kansas City Fed, one of my old colleagues, Jordan Rappaport. If you want to know as much as you can possibly learn about that answer, go read Jordan Rappaport's couple of pieces he did on economic growth and city size. And somewhere, I think it's right around 2 million. It's like about 300,000 cities really begin to pick up the pace, and somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million, they sort of stall. And then as they get to the super size, you know, these super large metro areas, it's definitely far different. But you asked about the quality of life and the amenities, and that is what's so, you know, subjective about this. I ask people, I have a daughter that wants to go live in Paris or New York City, and I tell her, I don't even want to visit. Let's live there. You know, give me a nice, you know, that's what I love about Oklahoma City, nice third-tier metropolitan area with everything you like, you know, with stability, you know, a reasonable government. You know, all these things are just wonderful about where to live. And it is a subjective thing, and I've come to the conclusion that there are two different types of people. Some like big cities and some don't. I have no explanation for why. I can't explain it for you.
That's his professional opinion.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Last question, real quick. All right. Thank you so much.
Hope it helps.
It did.